Good morning, everybody. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for joining me. Just trying to see if this time works for our live chats. Going to talk about combat sports. We will discuss really anything you want to discuss in the realm of MMA or boxing. I'm planning to kind of give a little breakdown on Beterbiev Bivol. Also, that great UFC fight in the main event the other day between Brandon Royval and Tetsuro Taira. We'll talk about fights coming up this week. We'll talk about the PFL show with Francis Ngannou making his return to MMA. And I will take your questions. So if you have any questions, pop those in there. My friend George, not with us today. He will be back at some point in the future, but he will be out today. So if you don't follow the Zapata Brand podcast, my friend, he's a good guy. Has a lot of interesting guests on there. Give him a follow, the Zapata Brand podcast. So do that for me. Anyways, before I get to any of your questions, and I appreciate you guys asking, I want to start by breaking down the Beterbiev Bivol fight. By now, you all know that Artur Beterbiev won a controversial decision over Dmitry Bivol in that fight. I scored the fight 7-5 for Dmitry Bivol. And, people in boxing always say, what is the right score? And what they mean is a range, right? A 2 or 3 round range of score. And the consensus I got from talking to people was that it would be 7-5 Arthur to 7-5 Dmitry or a draw. Anywhere in those 3 scores would have been acceptable. To me, I would agree, but I would go more towards 6-6 or 7-5 Dmitry, right? I thought Dmitry's boxing in the fight was really good. He stood in front of Arthur a lot in that fight, and I thought he did a really good job. And so, while Beterbiev's aggression and his power certainly were factors in the fight. And here's one thing that you have to know. The scoring criteria in boxing, power is a big part of it. So power is scored. And there is no question that the harder punches in that fight were thrown by Artur Beterbiev. So that probably swayed some of the judges. I thought Pavel Cardini's score of 8-4 was off. I just did not feel that it was correct, and I kind of feel like that was a little bit too wide. Bivol won more than 4 rounds in that fight. So anyways, we're going to go that way. So what is next? And that is the question. What is next for Artur Beterbiev? It's interesting. I don't know if they want to do a rematch, right? Certainly, when I talked to top-ranked President Todd DeBuff, he was in Japan. He wasn't in Saudi Arabia. He was in Japan for the back-to-back shows that Top Rank had there with the Japanese fighter, where there were 7 world title fights. Todd DeBuff said, we will let the market decide. There is no rematch clause. So, that told me that, they were looking for the biggest fight and not necessarily a rematch. So, we will see what happens there. Heading over to the UFC show last weekend, I really was impressed by Tetsuro Taira in that main event against Brandon Royval. But my Lord, Brandon Royval, this guy is incredible. I mean, and it was a really tough fight. He got his back taken a couple of times, was on the ground with all that control time against him, and he still managed to find a way to win the fight. And I'll tell you what, I mean, you can make a very strong argument that he deserved, not Asakura, he deserved the championship shot after against Pantoja after his performance in that fight. Pantoja is going to defend his belt in December at UFC 310 against Kai Asakura. But I'll say this, after seeing what Royval did, I think he deserves another shot at it. I mean, he has a win over Brandon Moreno. The only one in the top 5 he doesn't have a win over is Amir Albazi, who Moreno was going to fight on November 2nd. So, I thought that was that was a really good performance by Royval and a really fun fight. And I think what I saw in that fight said to me that Tetsuro Taira is going to be a future star. Brandon Royval said, I think this guy's going to be a future champion, and I'll help him get that way. So anyways, All right, I see some questions on here, so I'm going to get to the questions, and we'll talk about the other stuff. I'm sure there's going to be questions about some of the other things I was planning to talk about. And I know some of these are jokes, right, because of what happened with Dana White. But I'm going to just say, who is pound for pound king, right? Okay, so right now, I don't know what sport you're talking. So we are talking boxing and MMA. So if you're going to ask me a question like that, please specify boxing or MMA. Right now, if it's boxing, I say Alexander Usyk. I mean, I think it's very, very close with really 4 guys, but maybe 3 guys. Crawford, Inoue, and Usyk in boxing. And if it's MMA, I think right now it is Islam Makhachev. Now, let me answer the question. I know everybody's going to want to hear about John Jones. And so here's my take on John Jones. John Jones, greatest MMA fighter of all time. We don't argue that. John has done enough to make, deserve to be considered the number 1 MMA fighter of all time. But he's fought once in over 4 years going into his fight in November, and he hasn't fought in, what is it going to be, 20 months by the time that they fight. And so I have a hard time saying all these other fighters, like look at Alex Pereira, right? All these fighters that he's fighting all these, month after month after month, these difficult, tough fights. And he's going out there and John's sitting on the sidelines. And it's not fair to the guys that are fighting and competing to keep somebody who's been active for that long in the number one spot. My take on how I do it is I put a 12-month window on there. If you're on a drug suspension or any other kind of suspension, I remove you from the rankings. And so sometimes what happens is, they're out for 11 plus months and then a fight gets scheduled. I'll leave them in if they have a fight scheduled. But if there's nothing scheduled at a 12-month block, I remove them from the rankings. So John is not in my rankings right now because he hasn't fought in more than 12 months. That doesn't mean it changes my opinion of him as a fighter or my opinion of where he sits on the all-time scale. But it means that he's not actively competing, and so I won't rank him. So then I will put Jones back in after he fights Stipe Miocic at UFC 309 next month in New York. At that point, I will put him in, and I'll consider where he belongs. If he looks how I think he's going to look, more than likely he'll be number 1. So I hope that answers your question. Ray, how's it going? Really enjoyed your rebirth the last few months with going out on your own. Keep it up. I appreciate that, Ray. It's been a lot of fun. And you know what? It's a lot of fun, engaging with you guys. So I'm going to do this more. Let me know in the comments if this is a good time. I asked that last week. And so let me know. Let me know what you guys think. So anyways, let's see. What do we got here? Kingmaker had it 7-5 Arthur or Bivol, either way, or a draw, really. Yeah, that's what I said, right? I think that was the right score. Like, Kingmaker, I would say, I don't know 7-5 Arthur, because that would, I think 6-6 or 7-5 Bivol. But, I'm not outraged by the scoring. But I just kind of thought Bivol did more than enough to win the fight, right? So is John the pound for pound king? Okay, we answered that one. Arthur's aggression in certain rounds gave him the edge over Bivol's activity. That is how the judges clearly saw the fight, right? There's no question they saw that. But I thought, Arthur threw more punches, right? So if you're going to say Bivol's activity, but both were active fighters. And I thought Bivol was landing at a good percentage, right? And that is a factor there too, right? So Arthur missed a lot of punches, and the scoring criteria says effective aggression. And did we have that effective aggression? Thank you, Kenneth. I appreciate you. Thanks for watching. With Turkey running the show, they should do a bigger money fight rather than a rematch. He's referring to Bivol and Beterbiev. The question would be, who is a bigger money fight? So, he could fight Canelo Alvarez, right? But I don't know that Canelo is interested in doing business with Turkey Al-Sheikh. So if we take Canelo out of the mix and say he's gone, I did a poll the other day, and I mentioned people, but so the Beterbiev, the Benavidez, David Morrell winner, they're fighting in January, could fight him. Is that a bigger money fight? Bivol, and then I mentioned if Arthur went up, Jai Apatayev, if he stayed at light heavyweight, Joshua Buatsi. I mean, I don't know that there's a definite bigger fight at 175. certainly, I really feel like I feel like a Bivol rematch would be popular. My man Avery, I hope you're doing well, brother. Arthur is hard to beat. He has. I agree with all that. He has all those things, and he showed it in that fight. But Bivol has, Bivol doesn't have the power, but Bivol has great chin. Bivol has great stamina. Bivol can box, and I thought he did, very, very well. Rakid, what's next for Beterbiev? We've been talking about that. I'll tell you, I hope it's a rematch. That's my thought, because when it comes to the undisputed championship, that is the man in a given division, and we don't want there to be any questions or doubts and people saying, "Yeah, I'm not sure who won this." Right? Let's look at it and say, okay, I like this guy who won the fight. Make it definitive. So fight him again, and let's see what happens. And if Arthur wins another fight like that, well, and that may well happen. They're very closely matched, but I think that's the fight to make. But a Benavidez fight would be fun if Benavidez beat David Morrell. I guess Rakid, you were expecting Benavidez to beat David when they fight. I still think Royval should have taken that Azkura fight. I'm not sure why he did not take that. I did interview him last week. I did not ask him that question, and so I don't know why he did not take that fight. But if he would have taken it, then I think that the way it turns out, that looks like it would have been a number one contenders fight, right? So, all right, let's see here. All right, Muhammad, who will win, Bilal or Shavkat at UFC 310? I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about this yet, right? And so this is not my official pick, and I'm not trying to hedge or anything else, but I want to go through. I recently watched a lot of Bilal Muhammad fights when he fought Leon Edwards, and kind of came up with my idea how it would match up with Leon Edwards, and I made my pick of Bilal to win that fight. I haven't watched enough Shavkat fights recently, right? I've seen all Shavkat's UFC fights, but I haven't watched him recently to kind of think, okay, how do I think it goes? Off the top of my head, I think I lean towards Shavkat, but that is before I really get into the breakdown. Shavkat is really well-rounded, as is Bilal. I think that's going to be a really surprisingly fun fight. And so we'll see what happens there. Right now my lean is toward Bilal Mo, but we'll have to see what happens. Beterbiev should not agree to a rematch. Okay, interesting take, Joe. Eddie, Turkey, and the promoters make it clear they want him to lose. It could influence the outcome bad for him. Well, Eddie is promoting Bivol, so of course he wanted him to lose. By the way, I am hoping I'll use this time just to tell you a little bit of what I have coming up. I'm hoping to have Eddie Hearn either today or tomorrow. I do have interviews coming up with Paige Van Zandt. She's competing in the Power Slap, so I'm going to talk to her. I am going to have also this week Robert Whitaker, Max Holloway, Ilya Taporia. Hamzat Chimaev, I believe, is going to happen, but I think Hamzat might be next week, not this week. And I am working to get Alexander Volkanovski. So hopefully that is my schedule. But in going back to yours, Joe, I don't think Turkey has obviously Turkey's influence isn't on the judges, because it was pretty clear that Turkey thought Bivol won the fight, and the judges had it the other way. So I don't know what kind of influence, he has really going on here, but I understand what you're saying. A lot of fighters don't like fighting in Australia. Yeah, I mean, it's a long trip. If you're from anywhere else in the world, it is a long trip. But if the money's right, they will fight anywhere. So that's it. What do you think the PFL needs to do objectively to truly identify them as the number 2 brand? UFC is struggling to put together a high-quality card, so what do you think the PFL should do to take advantage? Well, I mean, number one, I'm going to disagree with you on the UFC struggling to put together high-quality cards. How often does the UFC have a card where we say, wow, that sucked? I mean, not very often, right? I don't think. And, sometimes, like, a lot of people criticize the UFC's fight with Pereira and Khalil Rountree until it was over. And then they were proven right, right? Like I didn't like the fact that they had a number 2 contender, Ankalaev, sitting there, and they ended up skipping him and going to number 8, and they took Roundtree. But having said that, Kingmaker, they showed they were right. It was a better fight than Ankalaev would have been. So we'll see. We'll see what goes on. When they come back. As far as the PFL, I mean, I just don't think the season works, right? Because you end up with a lot of the same matchups, and people are complaining about Roundtree and Pereira because you have 1 versus 8. Well, what do you get in the PFL every time? That you're getting those the top seeded guys facing the lowest seeded guys, and upsets do happen. But I think the PFL has a lot of money. I mean, I think that they should just go to make their bouts and do like they're doing for this show. Put on the best fights that they can put on and make the cards deeper. But they also don't promote very well, and I think that's something that they need to get to. The PFL is clearly the number 2 promotion, but there's a gulf between number 1 UFC, a massive gulf, and then number 2 PFL, and then a gulf between number 2 PFL / Bellator and anybody else. One championship is not remotely close to them. So I think there's just such a long way. But I think the bottom line for the PFL, if they are going to make a dent, make a run at the UFC, and I don't know that it's possible, right? I think at this stage, the market has spoken. The market has determined the UFC is the number 1 promoter. That's what like, hey, look, and you ask any, I talk to all my peers, right? But you look at the difference in traffic on our web stories, if it's a UFC fighter compared to if it's a PFL fighter, or anybody else fighter, LFA, or it doesn't matter who it else. I'm not dogging the PFL. I'm just stating facts, right? That's just how it goes. And so, it's just one of those things, right? But I think, so I think there's 3 things, the PFL has to do. I think the PFL has to improve their overall level of talent, right? They have some good talent that I think, is like, I have Dakota Ditcheva. I put her in my Sweet 16 pound for pound because, she really impressed me. And I think she has a chance to be one of the best fighters in her weight class in the sport, right? And she already is one of the best in her sport, but even to move up. But they need to find fighters like that and develop those fighters and be careful, in terms of, it's good to sign free agent fighters, but you have to have, sign the right ones. You don't want to just sign people. It's kind of like free agency in any sport. You see the NFL player that, caught Devontae Adams, right? He caught all those passes the last few years, but he's now in his mid-30s. He just got traded to the Jets. Is he really going to be what he was in the past? Are you paying free agent money for past production or for future production? And that's what you want to get. And I think that the PFL needs to increase their talent level, get rid of the tournament, and just, and match make. They have good people that know the fighters and make good matches. And then promote better. I think if they promote better, they do not promote very well. And I'm friends with people in their PR stuff and their marketing stuff, but they need to promote a lot better than what they do. So let's see. SG, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Julian, I'm not going to duck this one, but I don't, it's hard to answer that because his return is 7 months away. Who knows what Devin Haney is going to do between now and then? Who knows what anybody's going to be doing between now and that point, right? So I can't really answer that question because we don't know who's going to be available. I mean, I think a fight, if they could make it with Haney, would be the best fight, but it's just a difficult one to do. What do I think about wanting to remove the media? I think that's a joke, at least right now. I don't think that Dana is serious about that. But, I don't participate in those rankings. The UFC is looking into right now updating their rankings, right? And so they and updating the way it works. And I'm not at liberty to say anything about what they are thinking of doing. they interviewed me. The guy that is working on their plan interviewed me about it and wanted to get some of my thoughts. I have not voted because I always have felt it's a conflict of interest, right? I can make my own pound for pound and put it on my site. I don't do divisional rankings, but I kind of feel like it's a conflict of interest because we are then impacting how much the fighters make, right? Because if you get a title shot, you make a lot more money than anything else. And if you're, in the top 15, you make more than if you're not in the top 15, et cetera, et cetera. And I just have always thought it's a conflict of interest. So maybe, is that old school? You tell me, let me know. Do you think I should vote in the rankings and get involved? So who knows? My man, George, thank you very much. I appreciate that. George on his way. I know George is on his way to Philly. The reason he's not here with me today, he's going to pick his wife up at the airport. She was out here in Vegas for a few days, and he is on his way to the airport, picking Michelle up. Have a safe trip over there, George. George just did an interview today with Brian Custer, who is going to be doing the play-by-play on Amazon Prime for the Tim Tszyu fight. So if you want to check that out, I think that's a pretty good interview. It just went up this morning. So you want to check that out. Let's see. Do I watch professional wrestling like WWE and AEW? When I was a kid, up until, I think when WrestleMania started in the mid 80s, I liked wrestling, and then I kind of got away from it. And I don't really, every now and then on Peacock, they have the WWE rights, and I'll go in and watch WWE old school, and I'll watch those fights from the 70s on Madison Square Garden Network. Or actually, they have fights on there from HBO back in the days. You'll hear Vince McMahon calling the fights, and he'll say, "We're here for home box office," and that's very funny. And I'll watch some of those old fights, and Bruno Sammartino, Ernie Ladd, George the Animal Steele. But I am not a big current wrestling fan. I'm not against it, and I get it. I watched the McMahon documentary that was on, but I'm not a pro wrestling fan right now. Speaking of Usyk, how do you see the rematch with Fury going? Do you think Fury can learn from their first fight? Good question. I do think Fury. I picked Usyk in the first fight, and I am going to pick Usyk again in the rematch. But I think Fury has a lot better chance to win because of what he learned in that first fight. Right. I think at the end of the day, Usyk is a really special boxer and a really smart fighter, and I think that he finds ways to make adjustments in the fight that make a huge difference for him and lead him, to victory. But I also think that, Fury is a smart guy with good boxing. He's got that massive size. And I think he's got to find a way to wear Usyk down, right? Maybe lean on him, clinch him, get him on the inside, make Usyk carry his weight a lot, where he's going to have a 40 to 50 pound weight advantage in the fight. Use that, right? And I think he also has to keep that jab going, right? He has to keep that jab in Usyk's face, because there's certain fighters that their jabs are like power punches, and they hit you and it stops you in your track. And I think when Fury sometimes flicks it, right? But when he commits to that jab and he steps into it and he throws it, that jab is really an amazing punch for him. And so I do believe that is something that he should use, more often. But I'm going to still go with Usyk in the rematch, but I think it's a closer fight. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Aside from Usyk Fury, are there any more big boxing fights? I think there have been a lot of big boxing fights. Excuse me, let me get a drink here real quick. By the way, available at keviniole.com if you want your own Kevin Iole coffee mug. And guys, what do you think of the background? So I got a new background. So let me know what you think about that. I'm really liking it, but it is freaking big in this house. So it's interesting there. But I think there's been a lot of big fights, right? Coming up, and I think Benavidez Morel is going to be a big fight. And there are quite a few, but yeah, so I think that the sport is doing well. I mean, obviously the Saudis are putting all that money into the sport and they're opening things up, and that's important, but I think that's something that is really good. Thank you. I already got that question. Let's see. Any advice for an up-and-coming journalist? Yeah, I mean, I don't know how old you are, and I don't know any of your experience, right? A journalism degree is helpful if you're in high school and can go to college and get a journalism degree. It's helpful, but it's not, if you're not, don't sweat it. You can make it and become a big star without having a journalism degree or any degree, right? But I think what you got to do is this is a business that you have to do it and just get, so if you can't get a site to hire you to write or to talk, create your own YouTube channel, create your own blog, and do both of those things, right? And do it a lot. And what I would do is, watch fights, right? As soon as the fight's over, do what I do, right? So let's say it's a UFC pay-per-view. What I'll end up doing is usually three things. I'll turn around, and if it's a big enough fight, I will do a running story. So like when I was at Yahoo, they always wanted those. And what I mean by running is have a fight that's up, a story that's up 5 minutes after the fight. So the main event ends, and I write a short story, 400 words, to try to recap the fight. So people who immediately come to the website as soon as the fight's over, they see that. So that's going to, not going to have a lot of quotes. It's not going to have a lot of analysis, but it's going to be a quick story because you got to get used to writing on deadline because sometimes those things come up. You have to do that. So do that. And then compare your story with other people, what they wrote, like veteran people that do this for a living. Compare how your story looks to theirs and learn. You're not going to be as good as veteran people, right? I have done this. I am in journalism for what? I had a full-time job when I was 19 years old. I was still in college. I got a full-time job at a newspaper. I've been doing this for decades, right? So you're not going to be as good as I am at first, but you can get there if you do it. Then after you do that short story, then watch the press conference and do a column, do a feature story. It doesn't have to be a column. If you're younger and you don't have perspective, you want to grow into that, just do a regular results story and write it. And again, compare it against other people who are veterans that have done it. And then also do a YouTube video, break it down. Do like what I do after the fights. Go look at my Beterbiev Bivol video and just do those things. And as you do them regularly, you'll get better at it. And if you look at the work of others, you will get better yourself because you'll compare yourself. Look at yourself critically. That doesn't mean have no confidence. Be proud of your work and believe in yourself that you can do it. But also be critical enough of yourself to admit, hey, this person did this better than me. This person did this better than me. And the two other things I would tell you, I would stress: accuracy, accuracy, accuracy. Please be accurate in whatever you do. And then ethics. Have journalism ethics. And that is a whole thing. If you have any other questions, if I didn't answer it, you can message me on one of my social medias, and I'll send you. We can have a conversation. I'll send you a longer conversation. Yeah, I think Jappy Joe. I think Dana is meeting with the person that I referenced before. So, but if they do AI, God bless them. But I don't think they're doing that. But so whatever they do, it's their rankings. I hope they're happy with what they get, and that's how it goes. I think Arthur will knock Bivol out in the rematch. Bivol's team will tell him to not go on the back foot, which will get him knocked out. His back foot style won't impress the judges either. Could be. I mean, usually the old school, the old rule of thumb was always in a rematch, the person who won the first fight will usually win the second fight more impressively. Now, I'm not so sure I agree with that, and I think at least in nowadays that's changing a lot. But that's kind of the old, rule of thumb that people have talked about in the fight game for years and years and years. And I could see Arthur stopping him, right? Bivol, Bivol knows that power now, and he's been there for 12 rounds. Like, so how does he approach it now that he knows it? So the second fight is going to be different than the first, if there is a second fight. What are your thoughts on the unprecedented rise of Alex Pereira in the UFC, and where does he rank among other UFC legends? Good question. I mean, I think what Alex has done is remarkable, and there's very few fighters that have ever done that, period. I think it's akin to Anderson Silva and John Jones and the runs that they've had, because if you look at, other than his first couple fights in the UFC, he's been fighting pretty much only champions and highly ranked people. And, before Roundtree, it was champion after champion after champion. I think you have to, say he's right up there. He's beaten really good fighters. He's done it in a lot of ways. And I think if he beats Ankalaev, right? So Ankalaev is fighting Alexander Rakic. That fight will be at UFC 308 later this month. If he wins that fight, then we will see. I think I'll be able to make a more definitive point in where he is. Let's see. Oh, we're going to just hide that one. No, thank you. If you insult me, we're not going to take any of your questions. If I have all the financial backing in the world, how would I fix the PFL? Just what I said before, Nick. I mean, they do have a ton of financial backing. They have a lot of investors. They have Saudi money investing in them, so they have a lot of great stuff. So. I think they have it, but the three things that I said, I think they get rid of the league season. I don't think it works because you get too many matchups that aren't intriguing. And there is matchmaking that goes into it when they set the brackets anyways, right? But I think, you have to, let's just get rid of the league, make matchups so that we get the best fights that you can make. Improve the quality of fighters on the roster and promote better. I think those three things, are going to be big. It would be insane if Ankalaev wins against Rakic and the UFC offers him the title fight during Ramadan. Ramadan is in March, starts late February. So he'd have to fight. They could make the fight. If Rakic wins, they could. I believe they're fighting in Saudi Arabia in February, and I'm not off the top of my head. I don't remember the date. There could be that could be one where they go, or then you'd have to wait until after Ramadan. Probably then we'd be looking at the summer at that point. And who knows with Pereira? He might have fought twice between now and then. Thoughts on Ariel's new combat sports media? I'm happy for him. A lot of people thought when, Ariel started the Uncrowned at Yahoo that I would be upset, and I'm not upset at all. I'm happy for them. I like to see people committing to combat sports. They have a lot of really good people. I think Chuck Mindenhall is fantastic. Keith Idek is really good. Ariel. And so, I'm happy for them, and I hope they're successful. No ill will whatsoever. What's your take on the virtual face-to-face between Topuria? Topuria is a good talker, so we will see. I like how Ilya talks and what he does, and so he is a lot of fun. And he and Max, Max is an OG in the fight game, and that is it. Let's see here. Bert Watson, my man. Bert, also known as the babysitter to the stars. He wrote a book that you can get on Amazon right now about his time in combat sports. Bert has done it all. Bert's kind of like around my time frame, and it goes back to Joe Frazier in boxing. He worked with Joe Frazier. Worked a long time in the UFC. Then went in and worked for Bellator. Bert has been around a long time, and one of the best human beings you will ever come across. And I love Bert, and I'm not afraid to say that. And pretty much everybody else I know does too. If you know Bert Watson, you love Bert Watson, because that is the kind of person he is. And Bert, I love your brother. As far as your question is concerned, I like the favorites here. John Jones. I don't see how Stipe can come back after being off as long as he's there, right? Jones hasn't fought, as I said before, in 20 months, but he at least has fought within 20 months. Stipe is like, 2.5 years, and it's been over 4 years since he had a win. I think if it was Stipe, when he was active, and John when he was active, Stipe would have a chance at that fight because he had the wrestling and he had the overall game. But I think right now, I just don't see any way that he doesn't win that fight. I like Oliveira in that fight too. I just think Oliveira has more tools in that fight. Chandler's going to come in there like a bat out of hell, but I like Oliveira in the rematch in that fight. Tom Aspinall said Francis is fighting a bum who was finished within a minute by Tom's friend. He also said PFL isn't competitive. I think they have a lot of really good fighters in the PFL. Are they as competitive as the UFC? No. They have a lot of really good fighters, some of whom belong in the pound for pound. But are they as deep as the UFC is? No, I would say they are not. So, but that's Tom's opinion. And obviously, he has the right to say what he thinks. Why is everyone roasting Bilal like it's Thanksgiving? Bilal, for whatever reason, is not a beloved figure, but I think Bilal is a really good guy. I like Bilal, and I think he's a fun fighter, a good fighter. And so let's see. Thoughts on Dana being absolutely pissed off about Roundtree not being placed above whoever in the rankings. How can you be above Volkan after a loss? Dana is losing his mind sometimes. I saw, I think it was ESPN had an Instagram post on it this morning, and I didn't pay close attention to it, so I'm not sure exactly what Dana said. But, I think his point is that Roundtree deserves to be ranked higher than number 8. I think that's the larger point. And I think, based on the way he fought against Pereira, probably accurate. But given that I didn't hear Dana's specific comments, I'm not ducking the question, but I will go and watch it, and I'll, you can ask me that again when I do the next one of these, and I'll answer that question once I have seen it. So, Coach Diz, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Always good to talk to you. Agree with your PFL take. An overhaul in marketing would save them. Readjusting their talking points to avoid the constant UFC comparison and building their own identity should be the key. Yeah, I mean, I think, make your product as good as you can possibly make it and forget about the competitors, right? There was the Pepsi challenge for a long time, right? Did that do them any good? But I think, what you want to do is you want to put your product out there and market it in the best light. And if, people love MMA, right? MMA has grown as a sport, and I think it's going to grow even more. And so if you just keep putting on good shows and you sign fighters that people like and you market them so people know them, it's going to be good. And they do things sometimes that I do not understand, especially in terms of PR and marketing. I'm blown away by some of the stuff that they do. So let's see. Do you agree on what Ilya said about Max versus Justin final 10 seconds was, I guess, largely, right? I mean, there was some technical to it because it wasn't just, they weren't throwing out here. They were throwing in here. But, largely whenever you get in there and you just start throwing, big flurries of punches, I think, I think that's there. So let's see. Do I think John Jones will fight Tom Aspinall? I don't. I think John is going to retire after his fight next month. I hope I'm wrong on that because that would be a huge fight, assuming John beats Stipe, champion versus interim champion. I think that would be a huge, 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 huge fight. So I hope it happens, but I think it will not. Let's see. Conor versus Hooker would actually be pretty good if it happens. So Hooker on Saturday said he would fight Conor in February. Then was it Sunday he said that his wife is pregnant and he's not going to be fighting in February. So who the hell knows? I don't know what that was all about. And with Conor, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. Dana was also, and I said that. Dana was mad with Khalil being there. Do you like promoter announcer Conor? No. I mean, I think Conor needs to. Conor is a really, really, really smart guy, but don't, he's like always like 900 miles an hour, right? Slow down a little bit, and I think he would be better. So we'll see how that goes. What do you think of the media who were in charge of the rankings? If you look at the UFC website, most of them seem to be random outlets. I am not, just because you are not with a major media outlet or you haven't covered the UFC for a long time, does not mean that you don't know what you're talking about. That being said, I don't know a lot of the people that vote in those rankings. And when the rankings were first out, a lot of what you would consider the known MMA journalists did not participate in those rankings, for the very reason that, it was a conflict of interest and blah, 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 blah. So I don't want to criticize somebody I don't know, and I don't really pay that much attention to the rankings, right? Like I use the rankings when I'm writing a story. I want to say, and there's a main event. Okay, this week's Michelle Pereira versus Fluffy Hernandez. So I'll go to the rankings and I'll see, where is Michelle Pereira ranked? Where is Fluffy Hernandez ranked? And I throw that in there. And I rarely am thinking about it. I think it's good, but in any event, so I don't want to criticize anybody, but I think that they need, just generally, if you're going to do rankings, you want to have the best qualified people possible. Just because you're at a certain website doesn't mean you're the most qualified people. Just as the opposite, just because you're not at a certain website. So, I think maybe they ought to add some non-media in. So make it, have, maybe some retired fighters, give different people in different lines of work, a vote, not just solely media. Yeah, I've been watching, I am not the most expert on all the fighters in Japan, but I know they have a lot of great fighters. I wrote about Nakatani's win yesterday in that fight on my site. You can find that story on there. I have Nakatani in my pound for pound list. Of course, Noe Inoue could be number one pound for pound, but I am not the best at Japan, but I try to watch those fights. I'm getting older, so sometimes getting up at 3 and 4 in the morning is tough to watch all those fights. I'm in Las Vegas, but I do the best I can. Nice to see you've kept your journalistic integrity high. Thank you. Appreciate that. Could I ask Dana about Merab? He wants to fight O'Malley ASAP, but didn't give time to the poor young Eagle. Okay. One of the problems, Sean is saying he's going to fight. If Sean really had surgery on October 3rd, if he had surgery on October 3rd, he is not ready to fight, period. And, that is, that's a tough one, right? So you can't, I don't know, he had originally said, 8 to 12 months that he would be out. Then when when he supposedly had the surgery, he said it would be shorter. And then he said, screw it, I'm ready to fight now. So, that is it. Do I see Usyk as vulnerable to the body? No more so than anybody else, right? I don't, I don't think he's any more vulnerable than anybody else. You're probably referring to the body shot or the low blow, whatever it was that Dubois hit him with. And, that's why you're asking if he's vulnerable to the body. But, Daniel Dubois is one of the big hard punchers in boxing. And, whether it's low or whether it was on the belt line, it was close. And, I could see that impact him, but I don't think he's any more vulnerable to the body than anybody else. He'd been in there with some really big punchers, throughout all different weight classes. You might have noticed I tweeted last week before Beterbiev Bivol. I tweeted a fight of Usyk fighting Beterbiev in the amateurs. That was interesting to see. My man, MMA Joey. Joey, by the way, I want to mention to you, I did an interview yesterday with a guy making the walk MMA, and I specifically called you out and gave you praise during the interview that I did. So make sure you check that out. Thoughts on Bilal versus Shavkat? If Bilal wins, how much does the star power grow? Let me answer the second part first of that question. I think if Bilal beats Shavkat, 18-0, 18 finishes, and he's clearly the boogeyman in the UFC right now, right? He is the guy that everybody's, ooh, right? If you beat him, and I think Bilal's his star is already rising. you become, one of the elite stars in the UFC at that point. And that, that is a lot of times true of anybody who defends their title, because winning a title in the UFC is very difficult. And then defending it is even more difficult, right? It's very difficult to win two UFC title fights. And that's essentially what that would be for Bilal, 2 UFC title wins if he beat Shavkat. I talked about this earlier, Joey. I haven't watched any of Shavkat's fights recently over to break down the style. I think it's a really interesting matchup because Bilal's striking is getting a lot better, and we know he has that really good wrestling. Shavkat, is so well-rounded, has really good submissions, kicks, and he has everything. So I think that fight is if I had to lean now, this is not my official pick, as I said earlier. If I had to lean now, I would lean towards Shavkat winning that fight. But I'm going to, after the Jones Miocic fight, I'm going to watch back-to-back fights of Shavkat's and then kind of give my opinion on how I think that fight would go. Dominic Cruz, I think you're asking me there about Dominic Cruz being in the rankings, and I agree. He hasn't fought in almost 2 years. Take him out. He doesn't. He's a great fighter, but he doesn't deserve to be in the rankings. Thank you about the quote on my background. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted to kind of change it up, and I want people to go to my website. So go to keviniole.com and check it out. I would really appreciate that. And it's free. It's free to read. If you want to comment, just to prevent spam, we require you to register. You'll never get emails from me on that. And you can also comment on any story or create your own thread. You can use it as a forum if you want to do that. So I would appreciate you going there and checking out keviniole.com. Conor versus Hooker. What would you think if that even happens? I mean, I think Conor is the greater talent, but I think Hooker is active. I would favor Hooker now because I just don't know what the information I have about Conor, and I see him drinking and doing all this other whatever he's doing, right? He doesn't look like he's living the life of an athlete, and he hasn't had a win in how long, right? And the game moves on, and your body doesn't last forever. So I think, who is the more talented fighter, Dennis? I think it's clearly Conor, but I think I would probably, pick Hooker as I stand here now. Now, if Conor shows me during training camp that, he's back to somewhere, the old Conor, then that's a different story. But after that leg break against Poirier, how do we know what his mobility is going to be like? What is his body going to be like after all the partying and everything he's been doing? It is really, really, really long. And so that is going to be an issue. I have not heard any fight news about Cruz, so that one I can't help you with. So I have not interviewed Islam yet. Ali had said to me, so just so you know, I got the Umar interview done. That's up on the site. Ali had agreed I was going to get Islam, well, I guess it was like almost 2 weeks ago now. And then something came up on Islam's end that he wasn't able to do it. So all I know now is it is soon. It could be this week. It could be next week. So it has not happened. I stayed up the other day. It was funny. On Saturday, I got Umar Saturday night at 11 Pacific time, right? I think it was 9 a.m. in Russia. And we were supposed to do Thursday at 10 p.m. Pacific time. And there was confusion on the time. So Umar missed that. So we rescheduled for Saturday night. Well, Saturday, I woke up and I saw the Bilal Shavkat news. So that was like 8 o'clock in the morning. I wrote a story on that. Then I covered the Beterbiev Bivol. Then I covered the Royval Tyra. And then I had to stay up to do the interview with Umar. I almost forgot how I did the interview with, and so that's what I did there. I'm going to get this thing rolling. I know we're starting to get some of the duplicate questions up here. I mentioned that, he said that would be going. How long, Wick, I'm going to try to do these as long as there are questions, but I can't stay on too long. So I'm going to try to run through these very quickly here. would I rank Hennen in a top 10 heavyweight in the world right now? I would have to look at the rankings right now. Hey, look, Hennen lost a couple of fights that he got lucky and got no contests out of, right? And so that impacts what's going on. He knocked out Ryan Bader. What do we make of that? So, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, let's see. What's up, Doug? In my opinion, I think the UFC, what fight do you think the UFC wants more? Pena, Kayla, or Pena Nunes? Pena thinks the latter with a questionable result. Should Rocky get a rematch? I would say, okay, she deserves a rematch because I thought she won the fight. And I think a lot of people thought she won. I believe Dana thought, if I remember correctly, I believe Dana thought she won. But I think they have more lucrative fights out there, and that's going to hurt Raquel's hope of getting that rematch. And I think, that they are committed to Kayla Harrison, right? And Dana said, and you were at the press conference, Doug, last week, when he was being asked about Amanda's, return, everything, he said, I think Amanda is teasing. And he said, Amanda knows how to get a hold of me. Like, Dana loves Amanda, and if Amanda wanted to come back, I think he would give her an immediate title shot right away, and put her in there. But you were there and you heard what he said, and Dana doesn't usually say things he doesn't mean, right? And so I think the fact that he kind of feels like she's probably not serious and was just kind of having fun. So if I had to guess, I would think it's going to be Juliana versus Kayla. The person who asked about journalism, do you have a website? Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate your brother. What do you think of the statement that no welterweight champion is better than GSP in any area of combat? I mean, I have to think of who all the welterweight champions are. That's a pretty big statement, right? Because, George is up there as one of the all-time greats. Like, George is, you can make an argument for him number one all time. I don't think he's number one all time, but you can make an argument for him. But you can make an argument for him anywhere in the top 3 to 5, right? And so, it wouldn't be a shock to say he's better than any champion in any area of combat. Without just sitting here and thinking about, who some of the champions are, I don't know. Like, was he a better wrestler than Usman? I mean, who knows? I think he's, in every area of combat, he is one of the greatest who ever did it in the UFC. I will say that. GSP is best. Yeah, there you go. Do I think Cyril Gahn has any chance against Volkov? Also, what's your chance on? And it's not Cyril, it's Cyril, but missing Aspinall fight for a 2-minute cameo in a movie. Yeah, I think he made a really, 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 really bad choice by not taking the Aspinall fight. Really bad choice, and I don't think that was wise on his part. Having said that, I think he has a chance against Volkov. I will favor Volkov. I think Volkov is a better overall fighter, more well-rounded fighter. But do I think he has zero chance? Yes, he has a chance to win that fight. Do I think Dana has some weird motive behind his recent glazing of Jones? I have no idea why he's been doing that, right? But he and John seem to be in a good place, so maybe that's just kind of getting himself in a good place with John. Maybe that's it. Dana is trying to make someone face for the UFC to say the greatest in combat sports. If he is, Jones is the greatest fighter of all time. So why do you have to be pounded to be greatest fighter of all time? I don't know. I didn't mean to insult you. I thought it'd be fun. Okay, no worries. Apology accepted. Do you think Joe's potentially retiring with the heavyweight title is something Dana would want? No, he would not want that. But I think he will do that. The thing is, I think Aspinall is really good. I don't think Aspinall, there's some champions that hey, they're good fighters, but they're not generational fighters. I think Aspinall has a chance to be a generational fighter. Jones is a generational fighter. And, the guys that come along once every 20, 25 years, right? I think that's how good Aspinall is. So, if Jones moves on, they have Aspinall with the interim belt. He just gets elevated. But I think Dana is the kind of person, he likes big fights. He likes big events, and having Jones versus Aspinall would be the fight, there. So can a collab between fighters between the PFL, Bellator, and one create interest? There are amazing fighters and one that can match with. So here's what I would say. I think you want to, if you're going to compete against the UFC, you want to make the biggest fights that you can on a regular basis, and you want to promote unbelievably well. Neither of those organizations did either one. They were both shitty promoters, right? And that is something. So, PFL has a lot of good fighters in their organization. One has some good fighters in their organization. One's not a fully MMA league, but the UFC has the best fighters, and the UFC is the best promoter. So it's very difficult to overcome that. But if you end up putting it together. So I'm going to do about 5 more minutes, guys, because I know that we're, it's getting a ways, and I got some stuff going on here. So we've been doing almost an hour. So I'll go a little more than 5, but what's my thought on Nasruddin Imavov versus Izzy by early next year? I mean, I think Imavov would love that fight. That would be a big fight for him because you beat Adesanya, and then you're probably looking at the title. I am not sure Izzy would want that fight. We'll see what's going on there. What is your opinion on Merab seemingly avoiding the Umar fight? Do you think he's really concerned about losing the title in his first events, let alone losing to a Russian? Nick, don't believe the stuff you see on social media all the time, right? These guys, they talk trash to each other, and Merab is a funny guy, and you see some of the videos he puts out, right? So you don't know when he's being serious. If the UFC says they offered him a fight and he turned it down, then I would believe it, right? But I would not necessarily believe it otherwise, right? I don't know what the health of O'Malley is, so that's we have to see. And of course, there's gamesmanship going on. Umar said he doesn't want to fight during Ramadan, which is understandable. So if you don't want to fight during Ramadan, then, Merab's playing gamesmanship. Okay, I'll fight you in March, which is going to be Ramadan, and that, that's a gamesmanship, but I wouldn't read too much into it. But if he turns it down, I don't think that's a good look, right? In terms of the nationalities, I don't think that really plays into it. Jason, what do I think about Jones after the Stipe fight, win or lose? I think he retires, to be honest with you, Jason. That's my take. I hope I'm wrong because John is a great fighter. I love watching John fight, and John is good for the sport because he is such a high-level fighter, and an Aspinall fight would be so amazing, but I think John is going to retire. Great answers. Love the stream. Thank you. I appreciate it. If Ilya beats Max, do you think he will be fighter of the year? Boy, that is a good question, because I'll tell you what, if he beats Volkanovski and then Holloway, and then you're going to look at, so let's see, what did Pereira have this year? So Pereira had Prohaska, Hill, and Roundtree. I'll tell you what, now we're going to get, I think at that point, we're going to get into how good did they look in those various fights, right? Alex, we know, finished those fights early. Ilya defeated Volkanovski in the second round convincingly. What does he do with Holloway? If he wins a decision over Holloway and it's a questionable decision or just a ho-hum decision, does that compare to Alex winning, winning by knockout in all those fights? So I think part of the answer to that question, Jean Carlos, is going to be how he looks in that fight. But certainly, I think he has a chance to be fighter of the year. Safir, I already answered the question about Islam. Let's see, what do we got here? Some of the countries I have visited so far. Man, I have been, fortunately for me, I have been all over the world. In the United States, I think I have been to, if I've been to every state, I've been to Alaska and Hawaii, and I'm trying to think, is there any, I, off the top of my head in the US, I think I've been to all 50 states. I can't think of any continental state that I have not been to. Yeah. No, I've never been to Idaho, I guess. So Idaho would be a state that I've never been to. Going countries, let's see, what countries have I been to? Um, let's let's talk about countries that I've been to. Canada, Mexico, um, I've been to Brazil, I have been to Argentina, Europe, England, Wales, Ireland, Northern Ireland. I've never been to Scotland, never been to Sweden. I have been to Germany. I have been to China. I have been to Russia. I've been to a lot of countries. I've been to the United Arab Emirates. I've been to a lot of countries. I've been to Spain. So I've been all over. So yeah. Anyways, that is there. Let's see. Go Green. Thank you for the super chat. Go Green OG22. Thank you for standing up to report the truth, which unfortunately doesn't exist much these days. I try to be as upfront as I possibly can, and do that. So some people agree with me, some people don't, but that is where we are. What do I think is next for Izzy? Let me, since we're getting some Izzy questions, let me pull up the rankings and see what I would say, would be next. I mean, I do think the question before that we talked about, Imavov would be one. So, who I think would be a fun fight for Izzy too would be Caio Borralho, right? I mean, that, he's on a roll, he's looking good, but I think Imavov would be a guy that is right there too. So I would say, one of those two guys at this point right now would be it. MMA Joey, thank you. I'll have to check it out. Most difficult part of transitioning to independent. Two things is, number one is easily monetizing, right? Easily monetizing. That is by far the most difficult thing. I went from Yahoo, which is this massive site, and now I'm on my own. And you think I mean, I'm a pretty even keel guy, and I don't think that I have a big ego, but you think everybody knows you because you're at this big site for so long and everybody knows who I am. And then you get out in the real world and you realize they don't. Even on YouTube, like as I've been doing these YouTubes videos a lot more. And I see people in the comments, I never heard of Kevin, and I've been doing this for 40 years, right? And people say they don't know of you, and so it's just interesting. So I think those two things, monetization is very difficult. You want to make a living doing this. It's doable, right? But it's not easy, and getting advertising and all that type of thing. And then just getting access is very difficult. Like I am fortunate in the access part that for the most part I'm good, right? I don't have that, but I've been around for a long time. But somebody who hasn't been around as long time as me, that is a very difficult thing to do. Let's see. If an MMA organization like PFL were to tap into a potential NCAA partnership, could it be a game changer for them in terms of leveling the playing field? Jax, that is something that XFC is trying, right? They just started kind of an NIL program. I think it's it is one of those things that who knows if that's going to work. Anything that can help PFL bring better talent in is going to be better, right? To me, that's the only thing. All right, so I have to. There's somebody in here who's being an asshole, so we just got to get rid of him. So I am sorry. We're gonna get rid of this guy. I don't understand what some of you people think. I mean, there are some people in here that are complete freaking morons, and why you think it's funny to put those kind of comments in a live stream where there's children and people in there is beyond me. But knock yourself out. I'm just gonna block you. So. Do you think Bilal will do his training camp with Islam, since Islam will fight in January? I mean, of course they're going to train together, and Habib will be there with them. Um, uh, Making the walk with Apex closing for repairs. What cities do you think the UFC will visit? Dana mentioned Seattle being one the other day, and I think they're going to get. If you look at some of those cities that they haven't been to for a while, I think that they used to go to on a regular basis. I think those cities are all going to be prime targets, right? So I think Seattle would be one, Chicago would be one, Montreal would be one. Some of those more mid-sized cities, like Omaha, that they used to go to. You're seeing it. They're going to Tampa. I don't know how the Tampa is going to play out given the hurricane and all the damage down there, how that's going to work. But, that's, I think that's what they're going to do. Why doesn't AJ McKee go to the UFC? He shouldn't be fighting Paul Hughes. I mean, everybody's got to pick what is right for them. And it is, the PFL is right for AJ because he signed an extension with them. I don't know his reasons. I've talked to AJ a number of times. I've never asked him for his reasoning and why he does that. But, God, as long as he chose, I'm going to assume it was a financial thing. But that is what it is. I mean, I think most fighters are such in MMA that they want to challenge themselves against the best, and the UFC has the best. But, he may see the PFL on a growth path. Hey, look, the PFL ownership are smart people, and they know, what the marketplace is. And, they have growth plans, right? And maybe they have talked to AJ about things in their growth plan that we don't know, right? And so that's one of those things that I don't know, but everybody has to make the right call for them. Even though I think Umar wins, no way Merab is scared. That is what I think. I don't think fighters are very very scared. And once again, Gringo, I appreciate you very much. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. You are the man. Let's see. I think Uriah Fraber started some educational program for college. Yeah, no doubt. I'm just like, I just don't, it didn't bother me, that people say that, but it's like there's young people here, there's why make yourself look bad? That's all I think. Like, why make yourself look like an idiot, right? And that's what that guy was doing. And, so that is it. Best boxing fight I ever saw live. Okay, are we talking live in person or live period? If we're talking live in person, Corrales Castillo, that was just unbelievable. The finish was amazing. The whole fight was terrific, and the finish was one of the great finishes of all time. The best fight that I saw live, live period, would be Ali Frazier 3. I thought that was better than Hagler Hearns because it was 14 rounds of just those two guys hated each other, and they really went after each other. And I mean, Ali was about to quit at the end of the 14th round when Joe Frazier, when Eddie Futch decided, that's enough. You can't see, that's enough. Joe was never going to quit. Ali said that was the closest to dying that he ever felt. I think that fight was it. Let's see. Who is the most impressive fighter I've ever watched? Since you did not name the sport, I will answer boxing and MMA. And in boxing, the most impressive fighter I ever watched, Sugar Ray Leonard, I guess. Like, I saw Muhammad Ali on television, so does that count? But I actually saw, when I was a young kid, I think I mentioned this, some of you will know I said this before. Sugar Ray Robinson, in my opinion, is the greatest boxer of all time. He fought what turned out to be his final fight in Pittsburgh. I was born and raised in Pittsburgh, and my dad went to the fight and took me to that fight when I was a very young boy, and I have no memories of the fight. other than my dad talking about it over the years. But I actually saw Sugar Ray Robinson fight in person. So does that count, right? I don't count that one. I did not cover any Ali fights in person, so I never attended an Ali fight. I really started covering boxing on a big time basis, like in '81 with Larry Holmes and Ronaldo Snipes, a heavyweight title fight, and that was the year Ali retired. That was it. And so I would say Sugar Ray Leonard probably in boxing, and in MMA, John Jones. John Jones just could do everything. Big guy, with ability to do everything in the sport, and just so smart. So that's what I would say. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Who do I like, Pereira or Hernandez? Steve is taking Fluffy. I think Michelle is so dynamic. I lean toward Michelle, but if Fluffy gets him in a submission, that's going to be tough because he is a good finisher. So I would lean toward Michelle, but I think it's a good fight. Thoughts on Kai Asakura getting a title shot? I don't. He's qualified to fight for the title, right? But I don't like giving a title shot to somebody with 0 fights in the UFC. I think, Dana always talks about it's different in the UFC. Everything is different when you come here. It goes up a level. He talked about it with Kayla Harrison after her debut, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in that case, how are you giving Asakura a title fight? Because is it fair, period, to the other fighters who have been fighting UFC competition? And is it fair to Kai because he has not had the experience of having the quote unquote, if it really exists, the UFC jitters, right? So that I don't like it personally. I understand why they did it. I don't particularly care for it. So let's see. I can't speak for anybody else, why people are afraid to ask Dana questions. I think people ask them, I would disagree with that. I mean, but, Dana is the most powerful guy in the sport, and he's not, Dana's not hesitant to say what he thinks. And some people, remember, we're sitting there in that room and you're looking face to face at Dana. And some people who don't have a lot of experience might be intimidated. And also, and you have to consider this is certainly a big factor, but not only is that, but then it's, people are watching on the internet, and, you're going to, people might be intimidated by the comments of people on the internet or what they're saying. So, that would be, kind of why I think that, but who knows? So let's see. Was the plane crash the scariest moment of my life? You're not going to believe this, but it wasn't scary at all, because I didn't really realize what happened in that plane crash. So for people who don't know, in 2002, I was on a 10-seater plane. We were flying from Las Vegas to Big Bear, California, to go to Oscar De La Hoya's place for a media day. He was getting ready to fight Oscar De La Hoya. We were landing. We were coming down to land. I was facing the back. I was in row 3. And the person in row 2, his seat was back to back to me. So he was facing the front, I was facing the back. And a person across the aisle from me was another reporter on the plane. He was facing the front. So I was looking at that reporter, and he said, "Oh, we're almost right on time." So I looked at my watch, and I knew what time we were supposed to land. I looked out the window, and I saw we were at the level of the trees in Big Bear. And I turned back to him to answer. And just as I turned back to him to answer, the guy that was sitting next to him at the window said, "Hang on, we're going down." And before you even knew it, boom, and we hit. And then there's a bunch of smaller bangs, and then there's one bigger bang, and a lot of smaller bangs, and then we stopped. So when the plane stopped, the reporter who's no longer with us, was Royce Fior. He was sitting here. His seatbelt was malfunctioning, the only one on the plane, and he couldn't get the seatbelt. So it was like a 500-pound guy had put it on before, and he couldn't make it smaller. We thought we're on a 40-minute flight. What's the difference? And he wanted to sit next to me and talk to me. So he got thrown around. Nobody else really did. We were jarred, but we weren't hitting anything. So we come to a stop finally, and Royce's head is on my thigh. And I'm like, why is his head on my thigh? But before I could even process that and kind of try to move him, the guy who said, hang on, we're going down, that person said, get off the plane, the wings are on fire. So I look over to the window, and sure enough, I can see the flame and the wings are on fire. So I push Royce up in his seat. I get up, and the co-pilot came out. So the co-pilot kicks the door, or tries to open the door. It won't open. He kicks it once, it doesn't open a second time. And then he holds on to like there's a closet, and he didn't have the greatest grip, but he gets up and like he's doing a flying drop kick in wrestling. He goes boom, and he hits the door, and it opens. So the co-pilot goes out. The guy who was seated back to back to me goes out, and I'm the third person out. So Royce should be the next person, and he's not there. And I'm like, Royce, and I'm standing right at the step of the plane. And fortunately, the flames were blowing the opposite direction away from us. So you didn't even really feel the heat too much as you're standing right there. So I heard Bob Arum say, come on, Royce, get off the fucking plane. So I took one step back into the plane, and I grabbed Royce by his wrist. And you don't realize how your adrenaline is going at that moment. But I yanked him, and he went about 20 feet outside the plane. He fell. So we count everybody, and we see everybody's there. And then we're standing around him, and we're looking at him, and is everybody okay? And here comes the fire department. They go, get away from the plane. It's loaded with fuel. So we get up and we run. And some of you may have seen the picture. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, the picture of the plane burning. I don't know if this will pop in. I'm going to put this in the comments. I don't know if it'll pop in the comment and work. Yeah, so I couldn't get the picture into the comments, but some of you may have seen that picture of the plane burning, and we're standing there. It was a dry lake bed. Normally that would be a lake, so we were lucky it was dry. So many things went right for us. But I didn't even realize until after we were off the plane that, what was going on. I just thought, man, what a shitty pilot. So anyways, I am going to wrap it here because I've been going a long time, and I have some other interviews coming up. Paige Van Zandt is going to be coming up in just a little bit today. Please check out my YouTube channel. I appreciate you looking at all my videos, commenting. Let me know if this time works for you. Comment in below one of my videos, what time you want to do a live chat. I'll do them, when I get a consensus on what's the best time, I'll do it so we can get the most amount of people in and do that. Also, please go to keviniole.com and sign up for an account if you don't already have one. It's free. We will never email you, we'll never spam you, but and read some of my stories. I always have content on there. I did 3 pieces yesterday. So anyways, appreciate you guys, and we will talk to y'all soon. Have a great day. Thanks for joining.